afternoon or good morning, depending on where everyone is at. Today, we are going to be going through some tips and tricks for helpful and useful features in areas of QuickBooks. So some things that might help make data entry a little bit more efficient, some ways to personalize things for your QuickBooks desktop view, allowing it to make more sense and be more functional for what you're doing inside of the system. To start, we want to talk about some of the fun features that I really enjoy using and getting to show our clients that can help make data entry easier. The first one that we'll go through is called Add Edit List Entries. If we come in here to our QuickBooks file, under our List tab, you'll see that there is an option almost towards the bottom that says Add Edit Multiple List Entries. One of the common questions I get asked by our customers is whether or not there's a way to input data or update data in mass. There are always going to be tools like Transaction Pro Importer or Cessant, some of the common tools used for importing, but QuickBooks does also have its own features that allow you to make updates in mass. For this particular feature, you'll notice that we are given a drop-down list of the different areas in QuickBooks that we can make updates to. This functionality essentially is very similar to copy and paste from Excel. What it allows us to do is take data from an outside spreadsheet and input it into QuickBooks to save in mass. From our drop-down list, we can choose which element we want to make updates to. We see customers, vendors, and then our variety of item types, service, inventory, non-inventory, sites if we're using that location tracking feature, inventory assemblies, and then vendor items. The next option here for view allows us to choose what data we want to filter down within that list. You can see here QuickBooks automatically populates it to active list data, but again, we can choose from this drop-down list and we can choose all list data, only inactives, unsaved customers. If, for example, we were trying to make updates to the list data and certain information did not save the first go round, we can filter for that unsaved information to see why it didn't save so we can make updates, see any customers with errors, or we can create a custom filter. So it really gives you the capability to modify down to a certain sublist that you want to see. You can also do a search here, which will bring up any customer or any data that you're looking for if you want to isolate a particular list element to make an update to. The last thing here is this customize columns area. When you click on this, QuickBooks will show you the chosen columns that are in this screen view, as well as the available columns to add. As soon as one is highlighted, you can go ahead and add it, or if you want to remove a column because we're not making updates to it, you can again highlight on the right and tell QuickBooks that you want to remove it, as well as move these up or down. So once you have your columns situated, you can take an outside spreadsheet and copy and paste data in here in order to save in mass. QuickBooks will always sort things alphabetically, so a helpful tip or trick is to make sure that your spreadsheet matches the alphanumeric sequence that QuickBooks is going to show. But this is a great way to make updates to list data. One of the ways that I have customers use it frequently is to make updates to items. For example, if we've got items that are no longer used, you can make items inactive. Or if we need to update our cost and pricing, this is a great area to do that in mass so that we're not having to go to our list and make individual edits one by one. The next thing that I want to go ahead and talk about is being able to batch enter, delete, and void transactions. This doesn't apply across all transaction types, but it is a helpful feature, again, similar to our add edit list function, where we can input transactions in mass, or if we maybe possibly did a bulk entry incorrectly, we have the capability to rectify that by going in and using that delete or void transactions feature. If I come in here to QuickBooks, under our accountant section, for me, I am in the accountant's version of QuickBooks, so you won't see this listed across the top unless you are in the accountant's version. Otherwise, you'll see it under your company tab. When you are in your QuickBooks instance, there will be an option that says accounting tools. It's usually about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way down. So whenever you're looking in your own QuickBooks file, make sure you're looking at the company section. For me, under accountant, we'll see I've got this first option here. So again, we want to talk through the batch enter functionality first. So batch enter is going to be slightly different than delete and void transactions. Starting with batch entry, this functionality is going to be very similar to the add edit we just looked at. In QuickBooks here, you'll notice that the screen is nearly identical. We've got our capability to choose a transaction type. From this drop down, I've got the option to mass enter checks, deposits, credit card charges and credits, bills and credits, or invoices and credit memos. Once you choose a transaction type, the next thing you'll do is choose an account that these are posting to. So for checks, as an example, this would be the account that the checks are being written from. Once you have the transaction type selected, again, you are able to customize your columns and choose the fields that you do or don't want to paste information to in order to save the transactions. QuickBooks doesn't recognize certain information. It will flag it and highlight it as not saved when you go to input the data. So for example, if the payee was not already set up in QuickBooks as a vendor, it will not save it until that payee has been input. Similar to if the account we are posting to has not already been added to the chart of accounts, QuickBooks works to do that review to make sure all of the list data is already present before it does that save in mass. So this is a really great way if we're getting check runs as an example, or maybe downloading banking activity from our bank or credit card account. We can work to copy and paste this information in mass and do a save all at once, rather than having to individually save a single transaction at a time. Alternatively, if we want to look at how to make an update if something was potentially incorrectly entered and we need to do some sort of mass deletion or void, there is an opportunity to go through and make that adjustment as well. In QuickBooks, if I come back here to my accountant section, again, for you guys, this will be under our company section and accounting tools. We've got this batch delete / void transactions. When I click on this, you'll see that I have a similar setup to choose the transaction type that I want to make the mass adjustment to. I can also ask QuickBooks to show me any linked transactions. So for example, if I've got sales orders in the system and I want to see if they are linked to any invoices, I can make sure to include that information so I know what the ripple effect is if I delete a sales order that's connected to an invoice. Once I've chosen my transaction type, I can come down here to choose a filter for what transactions will show. I can either choose a date range for entered date, last modified date, or transaction date. So entered date is going to be the date that it was input into the system. Last modified is the last time that it was edited, and transaction date is the actual posting date. Once I've set those parameters up here, my list of transaction will show as available, and I have the capability to either review and void or review and delete. A recommendation or good rule of thumb here is making sure that each individual transaction has been reviewed first, and that we're not just doing this mass entry because there's not a way to undo that. So that is something to consider whenever we are doing any kind of batch function, whether it's batch updating list data, batch entering transactions, or batch deleting and voiding transactions. There is not a way to undo it. You just have to do the reversing function in order to make any kind of corrections. So always something to consider when you're making any kind of large updates to the QuickBooks file. But these are some great ways to help get that information in bulk rather than one at a time, or having to use an outside importing tool like Transaction Pro or Sasan. Continuing on with some of my favorite features here, now we want to discuss income and bill tracker. These are great snapshot view areas that allow you to see consolidated sales or expense information for your customers and your vendors. If I come in here to my customers tab first, you can see here I've got the option for my income tracker. One thing to note is if you are using multi-currency, QuickBooks does not allow the income tracker to be used because it can't work to do that conversion rate on this screen. So that is something to consider. If you're using that multi-currency function inside of the system, you won't have access to this feature. However, it does have some great information about where you currently sit with your customers and order fulfillment. It will show you any kind of unbilled time and expenses. What that means is if we've input an expense on the vendor side, either for time allocated or materials allocated to a customer, but have not invoiced back to them, they will show as unbilled here and ready to invoice. We also will see any open invoices that haven't been paid, what is past due, and anything that's been paid in the last 30 days. I can toggle between these to click on a particular area that I want to drill down into. And then from here, I can do batch actions. Like if I were to select these as an example, I can come in here and select an invoice. And then I've got batch options to do things like email or close out here. In addition to seeing this information, if estimates or sales orders were turned on in the system, you would also see the estimates that were recently input as well as open sales orders. One of the nice things you can do in this area as well is batch close estimates. Whenever you invoice in QuickBooks, that estimate still remains active. So this is a helpful way to go in and close estimates that have either been invoiced or are just no longer considered an active quote. So that's a helpful way to do cleanup for reporting purposes. Similar to the income tracker, we've got an expense tracker on the vendor side here. So whenever we want to look at information for open bills, open purchase orders, and anything that's past due, this bill tracker will give us the same view. We've got our list of purchase orders in the system, any open or unpaid bills, what is considered overdue, and what has been paid in the last 30 days. So rather than having to run a variety of reports like your aging, open summary balances, paid in the last 90 days, unpaid, this gives you a quick snapshot view of what is currently sitting as open for your customer or vendor. Moving into some personalized things that you can do for your QuickBooks settings itself when you're inside of the system are company settings, toolbar customizations, and then memorized reports. In QuickBooks, there's two areas for company and personal preferences. If we come in here to our Edit tab and down to Preferences, once that window opens, you'll be able to see that there's a variety of different areas of QuickBooks that we can make updates to in regards to the features that will show as available and what modules are or aren't enabled. When that window is open, You always have a company preferences and a my preferences area inside of QuickBooks. So as you can see here, we've got our different sections starting with accounting and working our way down. Everything will have a my preference and a company preference. Not all of these features in QuickBooks do specifically have a my preference area, but for those that do, you can work to create modifications specific to what you'll be doing in QuickBooks. So as an example, on the accounting section, there is a my preference area to help autofill the memo field in your general journal entry. You can also, in your checking, set default accounts to do functions like write checks, pay bills, pay sales tax, and make deposits. In the general section, you can choose your preferences for things like how you move between fields, either using tab or enter, turning on or off a beep to recognize recording a transaction, having QuickBooks place your decimal point. So there's a lot of different areas in here that you can work to make customizations to your particular user account. And then anything that would get adjusted on the company preferences section is going to be file wide, and that will apply to all users logging into QuickBooks. The next thing that we want to take a look at is toolbar customizations. I always like showing our clients how to change the view in QuickBooks and being able to see different layouts of what windows you have open or using icons versus the drop-down menus. So this is a fun one that I always like to show that is helpful when looking at being able to navigate inside of the system. Up top here, we've got this view option. You'll notice right now I have open window list chosen. What this does is it allows me to see any windows I currently have open between my QuickBooks areas, and I can toggle between them. So I can move freely between any of these, and any that I don't want open, I can work to close out. This is always extremely helpful so that you don't necessarily have to minimize a window to see what else is open. You can just use that view and open window list to see the areas of QuickBooks that are currently open. From here, you can also change if you want to use some sort of icon toolbar versus this left toolbar here. If we change this to a top icon toolbar, you'll see these become available at the top of the QuickBooks instance, and this is an area that you can customize. If I come back to my view, I can choose to customize this icon bar, and I can select in here what areas I do or don't want included based off of the typical areas I'm in inside of QuickBooks. So it's a nice way to add the specific features that you're going to be referencing on a daily basis. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my left icon bar just because that is the way I prefer to function, but there's a lot of different ways you can make modifications here to have it be set up the way you would like to use it. The next one here is memorized reports. This is a great way to be able to keep those customizations that you're adding to reports and then have them saved in a singular area so that you can always go back and reference them, and also even make them available for other team members. Whenever you're on any kind of report in QuickBooks, it will always have the capability to make a modification. If I run a profit and loss as an example, this report toolbar will be the same across all instances. I can come in here and I can say customize, and I can make adjustments to the fields that are displayed, as well as the filters that I want to show. I can add or subtract certain information that I want to pull on the report. Once I've made those modifications, I can come in here and I can tell QuickBooks that I want to memorize the report so that it will save those customizations that I applied. Even if you don't come in here to tell QuickBooks to memorize it, when you go to close out of the report, it will give you a warning that says you've made modifications to the report. Would you like to save those now? So it is helpful in ensuring that those customizations aren't lost. Once you've memorized your report, under your reports tab, you'll notice the second option here is the memorized reports area. QuickBooks naturally has a breakout of certain accounting sections where it already has its own default customized reports based off of regularly run reports. You can save a report in one of these default areas, or you can just save the report independently to the overall list. And when you memorize the report, you will see that applied here. So if I'm in here on a report and I tell QuickBooks I want to memorize it, I'm going to get this pop-up where it allows me to name the report. I can choose if I want to save it in a certain memorized group, and then I can also choose if I want to share that report template with others. So it does allow you to make that public for anyone else to access, or again, it can be a specific customization to your user inside of QuickBooks. One of the last fun areas that I want to take a look at is the accountant's toolbox. It's got a great variety of functions and features to help make adjustments in math, similar to some of those add edit features we looked at earlier. For me, again, everything is going to flow through my accountant section. It will be under the company tab for you guys. We have this section called client data review. I'm just going to go through a couple of the main ones that we typically use with our customers. The first one here is reclassify transactions. If we're using any kind of classes in the system, or if we need to make a modification and change an account mapping, you have the capability to do that in mass. So it's really helpful if we've made structure changes to the chart of accounts, as an example, and we need to make an application update to change the account mapping. This allows us to do that in mass, and you can tell QuickBooks how you want it to show you transactional data, if it's not item specific or if it's based on items, meaning our product and services list. So this is a helpful way to make adjustments, particularly to the profit and loss. The next one, if I come back to our client data review that I really enjoy getting to use from a cleanup standpoint, is this fix unapplied payments and credits. In QuickBooks, you can navigate to your customer or vendors area, and it will show you any outstanding transactions in the system that are unapplied. So for example, if we enter a payment, but we didn't apply it to a vendor bill or invoice, or we've got a credit that was sitting on account that we want to deduct from our bill or invoice balance, we can come in here and make that application. You can tell QuickBooks what payment or credit we want to apply to what vendor bill or customer invoice, and it can even work to save and close them out. So for anyone who has run their AR aging or AP aging and seen the $0 customers or vendors, this is a great way to be able to perform cleanup to help get those off your reports. I come back here into the client data review. Another area that we regularly use and reference for our clients with inventory is this troubleshoot inventory. One of the specific things we regularly reference is looking at any kind of negative quantities in the system. You can unapply all of the other filters with the exception of negative quantity. Once you have just negative quantity selected, you can choose a date range. And then in the lower right-hand corner, there's an area that says alert if there's negative inventory as of the to date, which is my end date here, or at any point in time. We like to choose at any point in time because what this will show us is what item at some point went negative. Typically, we tend to see where an item was invoiced that caused the inventory quantity to go negative, and then inventory was brought in afterwards to rectify that negative quantity. This lets us know inventory that went negative at any point in time so that we can help review and identify cleanup opportunities to keep that inventory correct. So as you'll see here under the accountant section and client data review, there are a variety of other tools in here that you can use, but those are some of the favorites and regularly used ones that we work with our clients on. So just to go ahead and reiterate, when we're talking about some of the main features to know and features that will be helpful in your daily QuickBooks use, we've got our add, edit, list entries, batch, enter, delete, void transactions, and that accountant's toolbox. We've also got the income tracker and the bill tracker to give you guys that snapshot view of what's happening with our customer and vendor balances. And then last, we reviewed some of those personalization options to modify QuickBooks specific to your needs. So making sure the company settings are set for your personal usage, changing that view and updating the toolbar, as well as memorizing any reports that you're going to be running regularly. The memorization part is key to help ensure we're not having to constantly apply those filters and ask QuickBooks to run reports with those specific data terms. Thank you very much.